Hi everybody. Let's talk about sample rates. So why do I want to talk about sample rates? The most boring thing you can talk about in audio. The first thing is that I know that there are some misconceptions out there. The first and biggest one is that higher sample rate means better audio quality and sonic differences in any way, shape or form. But this is utter bullshit. And I'm gonna tell you why. So you see, there are people that tell you that there's an audible difference between, let's say, 44.1 and 48 and 88.2 and 192 to 96 or whatever. But actually there is no difference. There can't be any difference. And this has certain reasons. Well, to understand why there is no sonic difference between any of these sample rates, we have to understand how sample rates actually work. So it's a rather complicated thing. Usually sound waves are continuous. So the sound is moving in a certain direction in a continuous movement. So let's say we have 1 hertz, that means 1 cycle of movement in the air at a second. And computers, as we use them most of the time for recording audio, except for when you avoid using Pro Tools, Logic, Cubase or whatever to record your stuff and record on tape. Tape can record actual continuous movements of the air in electrical form. So in an electrical wave, they can record these waves continuously. But a computer needs stepped inputs because computers work with bits. So signals that we record in computers have to be quantized. These are the little letters you see when you look at a waveform inside your DAW. So there are 2 mentions we have to quantize. One is the amplitude or the loudness of the signal. We can be quiet, really quiet, and we can be really loud. So that's easy to understand. And the second, that's the one we're always talking about, is the time. And the time is rather important when it comes to audio frequencies, because frequencies are time dependent. How many cycles do I get into 1 second? So the human hearing is mostly in between 20 Hertz up to 20 kilohertz. So 20 to 20,000 Hertz. At a certain age, you lose the ability to hear the very, very high frequencies like 20 kilohertz. I'm 30 now and I can still hear about 17 kilohertz at best, but I really have to focus on these signals to be able to hear them. So you might ask, well, how do we step these in? Well, it's quite easy. We just put in measurements in certain time intervals. So there were some people who thought about that really hard and did the math for us and the testing and so on. There is a certain amount of samples, timestamps so to say, you need to recreate a frequency properly. And this is the formula we need. So we need the highest frequency we want to recreate. Let's say 20 kilohertz. And multiply this by 2. So we would need about 40,000 samples to recreate the human hearing. And as I just told you earlier, 20 kilohertz is a frequency that only very young people, like little kids or very young adults, can still hear. So the frequencies we have at a 40 kilohertz sample rate would be more than enough to recreate everything you want to hear. This is called the Shannon-Nyquist frequency. The frequency you need to recreate every frequency that you want to recreate. So we know now that we need about 40,000 samples per second to recreate the whole spectrum that we can hear as humans. And even more than that, because we are not really able to hear 0 to 20 hertz. Why then are there so many different sample rates in your DAW? So this has a few reasons. The first reason is if you want to record ultrasonic levels. Because ultrasonic means something above the frequencies we can hear, like dog whistles or bat noises. So there are microphones and interfaces that can record above the sonic levels we hear. Ultrasonic, so to speak. But ultrasonic isn't used every day, to be honest. So why would you and I need anything higher than 44.1 kilohertz? And why the hell isn't it 40 kilohertz, but 44.1, which is the standard in which most DAWs record? And what do the others mean? So the reason why we have 44.1 kilohertz is because above a certain frequency we need high-pass filters. Why do we need these high-pass filters? Because there is something that is called aliasing. And aliasing is quite complicated to explain. It has mathematical reasons. So if there's something that is above 20 kilohertz, it can't be replicated quite right. So it happens that it gets mirrored down. Maybe, for example, this is called aliasing. Stuff that happens above our sonic levels that can come back and be heard again, but those are mostly artifacts we don't want. So when does this occur? Most of us have a certain range where they can sing in at most, which is far away from the highest notes we can hear. And also guitars and drums mostly don't do this stuff above these levels, because you need to have very light materials that swing, that can be able to produce anything ultrasonic. So this doesn't happen that much, especially with the microphone technique we use, because, like, for example, dynamic microphones, which have quite heavy capsules, can't move this fast. They sometimes crap out after 10K, 15K maybe. This can occur mostly when we use distortion or saturation or overdrive or whatever you want to call it, like in plugins. So overdrive, saturation, distortion, whatever, those are nothing else but frequencies that are added above your signal in a certain distance, harmonic distances, like a fifth above, a third above. Let's not go down there. It's a very, very deep rabbit hole where you can suffocate in if you want to. So because of this aliasing that can occur when we use, for example, a pulse simulation like SSL or Neve simulations that have a certain characteristic and a certain saturation, that's where we use aliasing. And so we know that at 44.1 kilohertz we can divide it by 2, and we know we can record up to 22.5 kilohertz. This means we have to use a rather steep high-pass filter to get rid of maybe aliasing problems. Because the easy solution for aliasing is just cut off every frequency that is above a certain threshold, like 22 kilohertz or 20 kilohertz. So we have to use quite steep filters. So if you record at a higher sample rate, it is quite easy to avoid aliasing. Why is 44.1 kilohertz the standard for CDs and Spotify when we have higher resolution options which don't sound different but make the aliasing problem smaller? Well, that's quite easy. It's because of bandwidth. You see, the first really digital product that went to the masses was the CD. And the CD had a limit of 780 megabytes or 770, under a gigabyte, which was a lot in the 80s when it came out. But it was still kind of limited. So with this limitation of space on the CD, we had to compromise. And well, the compromise isn't that big, so 44.1 kilohertz was the thing. Today we have lots of spaces on our hard drives. I mean, there is almost no computer sold that is under a terabyte of space, and especially when you're working with video files and with audio files, you want to have a lot of space on your hard drive. But higher sample rates also need higher CPU usage and higher RAM usage and so on and so on. So if you want to record at a higher sample rate, you need to make sure to be able to have the hard drive and to have the higher capacity in your CPU, in your RAM, and so on and so forth. And you know, some projects can get really, really big. I mean, hundreds of tracks. Maybe that's not always necessary, but it's nice to have. But if you use, let's say, double the sample rate, like instead of 44.1, we use 88.2. That means we need double of everything, double the CPU, double the RAM, and double the space on your hard drive. Those are the limitations, just for better anti-aliasing. There's no audible difference. So I don't want to encourage you to only use 44.1. I use 48 because most of the time when we record for YouTube and for video media, the standard is 48 kilohertz. Because of that, I use 48 kilohertz. And also you just need to use a less steep low pass filter. So the question is not, well, will it sound better with 44.1, with 88, whatever? It won't. There is no sonic difference. The question is just, can my computer handle it? And am I recording anything that goes well above my hearing spectrum? And I've heard even some pros telling me, well, yeah, higher sample rates, they sound more clinical, or that's lower rates are more dirty. And yeah, that would be true if we would use, for example, 20 kilohertz, which cut out at 10 kilohertz. Just be cautious at what you listen to, and just be cautious at what you use. And do whatever the fuck you want. And don't let anyone fool you that you need to record at a different sample rate. Record the sample rate that you think is best for your setup and for the use case. For example, CDs, mostly 44.1, streaming, mostly 44.1, video, YouTube, Vimeo, and so on, and TikTok, 48 kilohertz. Those are the sample rates you deliver in. So if you want to go higher, good for you. Do you need to? No, not at all. Well, I won't tell you either that you have to click the like button or subscribe to the channel, because I don't know if there will be regular updates, because well, this is not my job. I am a working man, and I am expecting a child, so time can get quite limited. So, well, I hope you enjoyed everything I told you, and I hope you get something out of it, and I will see you anytime, anywhere, and maybe in my next upload here. Have a good time and goodbye.